or maybe you're sad. This is the last one of the lies that in our series here that you may believe. You may not realize you believe that because the world has kind of sold it to you so well. But again, if you have something that you have a question about, if you have something, especially those who are watching online, you can go ahead and pop it in the live chat right there, and I will take a stab at answering it. I don't make any bones about it. I'm just a pastor of a church. I have some thoughts, and that's it. I'm no expert by a long shot. So anyway, so tonight we're going to look at a good God wouldn't judge. How many of you have ever heard this one before?
I'd be raising my
Okay,
hand
so
up.
some of you, so it's one of these things, right? Like, I mean, you could go through your life and never hear someone actually say something like this. And at the same time, depending on the circle you're on, you would hear this quite frequently. So again, I want to go back and just kind of recap, because I think it's so very important to kind of understand, because all 7 weeks we've kind of been talking about this. And there's something to be said for subjective claims versus objective truth. So for those watching online tonight, I'm sorry there's no slides, so you don't get to follow along. Things happened today, it just didn't work out. So, with that said, a subjective claim. How many of you remember what a subjective claim was? Or how many of you just want to take a stab at a subjective claim?
Something that can change.
Something that can change, absolutely. So it has a lot to do with your subjective, right? Like your point of reference in life, right? I always think it's hilarious with my kids, right? Because I have one child who's always like, oh, it's gonna take forever, right? You know, it's like, and subjectively speaking, I'm sitting there going like, wow, we got in and out of the doctor really quick. I don't know what you're talking about, but because it was perceived as boring for just a second or two, even though we were only there for 15 minutes, it was just basically like, from his perspective versus my perspective, I'm seeing it as something that's relatively quick. He's seeing something as it takes forever. And so subjective claim is something that can be changed by my preferences or my emotions. Now, we've talked about this over the course of the last couple weeks, right? About how our emotions are built up right now to be what we believe and what we trust and what we think of. You know, I was talking to a group of boys last night. One of the things we talked about was this whole idea of what makes something true. So let me ask you, what makes something true?
Oh, it's on the internet.
It's on the internet.
Truth. It stands for itself. You don't have to remember it. You don't have to say it as many times. Because if you say a lie, you have to remember that lie. With the truth, you don't have to remember the truth. Especially in my life, I got too much stuff to remember.
I see where you're going there, but I have to remember the truth quite a bit, in all honesty.
Well, what I'm saying is it's there.
It can be proven.
It can be proven. Anybody can say it. You don't have to. It's always there. Where a lie, you have to remember that lie because you made up that lie. The truth is what it is. Truth is factual. Truth is what it is. It's that.
You don't have to remember what you said beforehand for a lie or for a truth. You remember what actually happened, or you remember what the truth was.
And we're thinking it very much so in the point of like maliciousness, right? Like a lie versus a truth and everything. I think it's important to kind of recognize that because truth is really based in our feelings and our emotions right now, that can change quite a bit. So what I mean by that is this, right? Like, and this is what the world has been teaching for the last probably 30 years, quite a lot, is that if it feels right, then it must be true. If it feels good, then it must be correct. And so here's the thing. One day I can decide that living peaceably with people is the right thing to do, and that's the truth. And the next day I can decide, you know what, I've had it with my neighbor, and I'm going to drive my car through his house or something like that, right? Now that is
legitimately not my thought right before you even brought him up.
Okay, well I was using neighbor as generic. I was using neighbor as generic, not as my actual neighbor. Yes. I was talking about Jesus like, who is my neighbor? You know, the one who showed him pity type thing, right? I'm not talking generically speaking, right? Like, you all are my neighbors, right?
Bring up his neighbor.
Well, I'm just,
Neighbor.
but I'm just, again though,
Okay.
the point being is this, right? Is that if my belief structure is based on what I feel in that moment, then that can change from moment to moment. And that's why we really live in this day and age where there's no absolute truth. Now, that is how the world views it, but there's also, you got to remember, subcultures to this, right? So on one side of it, you'll have some, like we've talked about, scientists and atheists, and how they're very much so are like, you need to be able to spell it out 100%. For me to believe it, I need to see empirical truth. And on the other side of it, what you're going to see is you're going to see people where it goes, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't feel right, so I'm just going to reject it because my truth is this. And so you're going to see the wide spectrum across our society. But again, it's very important to kind of recognize objective truth versus subjective claim. So again, the subjective claim is claims have become the basis or truth in reality. People laugh at me, and therefore I feel like nobody wants me around. You know, today I feel like, you know, I feel like I'm an 80-year-old man because there's a front moving in and what will soon be arthritis is acting up in my body, right? And so therefore I can, you know, if I feel like I'm 80, therefore I can just say I'm 80 years old. And what's to stop me from feeling that?
Then shouldn't you be able to claim like AARP and all those other things?
Exactly. That's the way I feel. Why shouldn't I be able
And
to?
if they don't,
I should be able to file for.
because you self-identify as.
I should be able to apply for Social Security right now because, you know, I feel over 65 and I should get my full benefit. What? Because I feel over 65. And so, like I said, this is a ridiculous thing, because when we look at age, right, and this whole idea of like this subjective feeling, how I feel versus what is objectively true, right? I have a birth date, and because this is online, I'm not saying what my birthday is, but I have a birthday, and objectively speaking, I know that my birthday puts me well under 65 years old. And that's something that can be mapped out, objective truth. I can go down, or actually no, because we're in Texas, so I could go up to the courthouse in in Suffolk County, which is, that's Boston, right? Suffolk County?
Yeah.
So I can go to the courthouse in Suffolk County in Massachusetts, and I can say I want a copy of my birth certificate, or you can get a copy of my birth certificate, and then basically, or maybe you can't get an actual copy. Point being is this, you can actually look up what my records are, and you can see and point to a day and say, yes, this is the day that this Mike Borghese, who was born in Boston, we can point to and say, this is his birthday. This is when he was born, and we can see that. And so as a result, then you can use math and just basically say, okay, if he was born in the 80s, well, let's kind of do some math here, and all of a sudden we figure out that it's 2021 and we have his age. And I think it's important to kind of remember this and recognize this, because those are things that are truly what we would call an objective truth. What makes them an objective truth versus a subjective claim?
Well,
Wokeism.
Not where I was going, but okay.
no, well, objective, like I said, was you found the facts. You found that you know, Mike Borghese was born in the 80s. There's a birth certificate. There's eyewitnesses that show that that has happened, right? There is no feeling to it. It is concrete. It is something that is there.
So what makes it concrete?
These are things that are not a matter of opinion. These are a matter of they're part of reality that we have.
So they're not a matter of opinion, they're reality.
say also that, that there are things which are gray. The fact that some things are black and white doesn't mean everything is.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some things that we have to hang our hats on.
Sure.
And ultimately they tied it to our Creator and His character.
Sure. So again, these things that are reality, right? What makes them different from a subjective claim?
They can't change.
They can't change, and why can't they change?
I didn't, but
Well, they're documented.
They're documented, okay. And
We have
where do
false
the
documents.
where do the documents lie in regards to you and your feelings?
In your heart.
No, your
They don't
feelings.
matter if
Your
Your
feelings
feelings are in your heart.
Your feelings are inside.
No, no.
Outside. That's the word. And so again, it's
So
so
it's outside,
important.
outside your feelings?
Yeah.
Well, it's outside of you, right?
Okay,
It's you're
outside of
searching.
you.
It's
Okay.
something that can be tried outside of you, right? And so that's the key word. I thought it's so very important to kind of recognize that key word outside, because so often we look for truth in everything, but we're looking for truth. And what does the world tell us? Seek inside your heart. Look inside your heart. Trust your feelings. You'll know it when you feel it, right? Whatever feels right. Should I continue to dating this woman? Well, the heart wants what the heart wants, so I should just trust my heart, right? And so again, this is kind of recapping what we've talked about in the past. But again, the foundation for all this is this whole idea that there are objective claims. And those objective claims are things that rest outside of me. And so I was talking with the Boy Scouts I was talking to a Boy Scout troop on Monday night. And so one of the things we started talking about, we said, hey, like when it comes to Christianity, what makes Christianity different from so many other world religions?
We have proof.
Real evidence.
There are objective truths that are outside of what I believe in my heart to be able to point to things. We have eyewitness accounts. We have eyewitness testimony. We have a lot of eyewitness testimony. Not only do we have a lot of eyewitness testimony, but what we have is also a lot of documentation that puts people in a historical context. Pick on, say, like Hinduism, for instance, right? Like, I'm trying to remember, is it the god or
I got a lot
goddess?
of them.
Well, I know, I'm trying to think one of the main ones is Shiva? Yeah. Is it has a head of an elephant or something like that?
Oh,
right?
that's the baby one.
Well, I'm just saying though, right? Like it's like what my daughter was telling me about this because I don't know, she had to study it for some reason, and she's like, oh yeah, what happened was like the god like accidentally knocked off the head of the baby, and so they were looking for it, and so they went and found the head of the baby, and they couldn't find it, but they found an elephant head, so they popped it on the elephant head, and that's where the god came from and everything. And you go, I'd really like to see some objective truth to that one, right? I would really like to see, like, can scientists recreate that? Because from what I know, if you cut off a head, like every zombie movie has ever taught me in my entire life, is that is the kill shot, right? You know, every video game I've ever played is that if it's a headshot, it's instant kill, instant death, no matter what. And so this is where I go, okay, like this would be the first time in history that this has happened. Where is the truth to this? There isn't a lot of it, right? And so I think it's so often, if you compare a lot of the world religions to this whole idea of an objective truth that's outside of yourself that you can kind of test. Again, one of those things, right? People go, well, how can you test if Moses parted the Red Seas? How can you test if Jonah was swallowed by a fish and everything like that? Well, and I can recognize that there are some things that we have to take on faith. But again, it all comes back to the gospel. It all comes back to the fact that there was a guy, his name was Jesus. He walked the earth. He claimed to be a God and man at the same time. And he died for our sins. We can find a historical being named Jesus. We can find historical documents that point to him. We can find historical documents outside of our sacred text that point to him. We have found the tomb of the guy who killed him, right? I mean, we have found a lot of these things that kind of are able to kind of prove and show these things. And so that's why we have this. And so, like I said, there's a lot of books that have been written by many different authors. The classic one is Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. There's something called the C.S. Lewis trilemma, which is, again, it's like either Jesus was a liar, a lunatic, or a Lord, right? Because of the claims he said and what he did and everything. And I don't want to necessarily walk through that here in this time that we have together. But I want you to kind of see and recognize that the problem that we have in this world, the problem that we see amongst, was it our kids, our friends, our neighbors and everything, are the way people feel. And how much so the world has taught us that if I feel it, then it must be true. And how that really has shaped and molded our society so much. So let me turn it over to you all. How have you seen that this is how I feel really shape and mold our world right now?
Well, if you no longer feel like you love the person you're married to, you just get a divorce.
Sure. I don't feel like I love my spouse anymore, so why can't I just divorce them?
I was just gonna say, if you don't feel like a woman, you're a man.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Yeah.
Gender is no longer, gender is just a social construct, right? Like I can feel whatever.
You
Someone,
can identify as an 85-year-old man if you want.
yeah, exactly. I can identify, man. It's really interesting, right? So I think it was actually you who told me this the other day. So apparently, because you could never get this sanctioned in the United States of America, right? Because this is just barbaric. But they had a fight sanctioned in Mexico where a woman who claimed to be a biological woman was going to fight a person who claimed to be a biological man. And it did not go well. Like they had to stop the fight because they thought he was going to kill her and it's one of those things, right? There are objective differences between biological men and biological women. One of my favorite things, and I can't remember, and I don't know if any of you remember how to do it, probably because I'm a guy and I can't do it. There's something that women can do with their elbow that guys cannot do.
Your elbow turn it the way.
Well, I know the biological structure of it, but it's something like you can like do something and guys just can't do it. I can't remember what it is. But the point being is this, right? Is that women have a biological advantage over men, that their elbow is shaped differently than men are. And the reason why it's shaped differently is because they're the ones who carry babies. And so it's advantageous to carry a baby, to hold a baby, to nurse a baby. Where I just ran around carrying my children like footballs because I knew that way I would not drop them. My coach did instill that in me the right way, right?
That's something else. Women can have babies. Men cannot.
Well, you would think so, right? There
That's the
are.
way it was designed.
There is a design for that, yes. And so, again, like these objective truth, and again, I'm on in your notes, slide 3 here. Objective truth is something that cannot be changed. 2 + 2 is 4. I have a food allergy. No matter how hard I want to be able to believe that I'm not allergic to shrimp, if I eat shrimp, I'm in trouble, right? Now, that's just hypothetically. I'm not allergic to shrimp, just because everybody's looking at me like, what? I'm like, no. As far as I know, I don't have a food allergy. But if you have a food allergy, right, you can't just be like, well, today, I believe that I'm going to be okay, and so I'm going to eat peanut butter, right? I remember I was on I was on a retreat in college, and this girl I was with, like, she literally was allergic to apples. She was really hungry, so she's like, I'm gonna eat an apple, and we're like, don't eat the apple. She's like, but I'm really hungry, and we're like, but you said you're allergic, this isn't gonna end well. And she's like, but I really want it. And so she, as much as she wanted to believe it wasn't gonna be the case, her lips swole up to they make, I mean, they were bigger than my fingers, right? I mean, it was just, I have ham hocks for a hand here, right? But I mean, like, it was bad, right? But she was happy as can be, and we're like, do we need to take you to the doctor? She's like, oh no, I'll be fine. Like, she can't,
As long as she can breathe.
she cannot take that feeling away. No matter how hard she feels like that she was going to be okay. The fact of the matter is her body had a biological response to it. So this is a very long setup, but also too, I wanted to kind of recap this stuff because this is at the heart of it, especially when I was talking to the Boy Scout troop here at our church on Monday night. It's just a good reminder of why we're doing this and what makes Christianity so different and what is the point to why we kind of study this and why we do this. Because for us in our current day and age, in our current culture, in the most circles that people are going to be in, is that people have, I feel this, therefore. I feel like God doesn't exist. And so I have some things that I can kind of point to that are empirically speaking, but I can cling to the fact that there are animals in the evolutionary, fossil record that we haven't found yet, but I believe that we're going to find them that will prove that certain animals are going to yield will yield what we have kind of discovered in the fossil record, right? And again, that's kind of recapping some stuff. But again, all this stuff. And so this is where it comes down to. I'll ask the question. How many of you like the feeling of being judged by another person?
No.
I know, right? I mean, no one really likes it, right? Well, let's go. What's an example of you being judged every day of your life? Like just an everyday occurrence in your life, just random things that happen to you throughout the day. How have you been judged? So we'll take today, for instance, right?
By my wife.
By your wife, okay. I'm not going to touch that one, but okay.
By our driving?
By your driving, did someone beep a horn at you today?
I mean, yeah, but that's probably because I have a sticker on the back of my car.
Okay, well,
On the kid's back?
Honking the kid falls out. I assume that's why they
well, maybe
honk.
there's an objective truth to why they're honking at you, right?
As a parent.
Sure.
Ooh, the way I dress.
The way you dress, absolutely, right? How about the fact that I put on a pair of clothes in the morning and I feel like they don't look good, so I change them out. You're judging yourself, right? It's based on our feeling, right? I mean, we go through these things every single day of our life, right? And we have these constant, non-stop things. But here's the thing, though. How many of you like being judged by another person?
It's my favorite thing.
It's your favorite. So I don't know if we have any comments or anything in the live chat tonight right now. Nothing, that's fine. But you know, it's really interesting, right? Because if you want to talk about judgment, right? Like go to the comment section of an article you just read.
Yeah.
Oh my! But so I don't know where it is. Maybe I'm just old. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I'm like, I read the article and I formulate my own opinion, and I really don't need to know what, you know, like, was it, I don't know, you know. Well, yeah, ABC 123. I was trying to think of a funny screen name, but all the ones I was like, I'm not sure I want to say that out loud.
There was a girl on America's Got Talent, and she would broadcast on her Facebook songs that she wrote. And then she made a song of all the comments, the negative comments she got. And it, you know.
I mean, I think that's the biggest place where people are judged is through their comments on Facebook.
Sure, absolutely, right?
That's why I never read the comments.
I mean, you know, so those things like, I mean, like, we have a filter on, our YouTube page, where you see, what's called, where we don't always get a lot of comments because we're just not a super popular YouTube stream and page and everything like that. But I'm like, I got really excited because a couple weeks ago we got some comments, but I was like, none of them published. And I'm like, oh, that's why, right? Because we have a filter on it, right? But I'm like, I could really get down on myself because of the names that people were calling me. Again, those names that, you know, would make us not want to publish things. Now, what do I care what, you know, some guy said who has a picture of an airplane for I mean, who knows, right? I don't know anything about him, but it's one of those things so easily we give our feelings to other people, and we dwell on those feelings, and we allow people to involve our feelings, and we kind of just continue to go through here. So judging becomes an issue, right? So the question I have for you is, how many of you have heard that, oh, I'm a Christian, so I shouldn't judge? How many of you have heard that, right? So basically, right? So let me open it up to you. Is that a true or a false statement?
False.
It's a false statement, all right? So why is it a false statement?
Because Jesus even says that there's the times that you can judge if you know they're doing something improper.
Sure.
You can judge, but you can't condemn. How's that?
So Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, you have it on your handout. For those watching online, you would have to, sorry, there's no slide, you'll have to pick up a Bible. Or if you're watching on a computer, or if you're cool enough to have an Android, you could do a picture-in-picture, and you can have the stream going on and pull it up on your phone. However you decide to do it. Anyway, so why Apple won't let that happen, I don't know. So Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 says, "Judge not, that you not be judged. For the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use it, it will be measured to you." So let's take the Matthew 7 verses 1 and 2. What does that mean? Put that into your own words. What is Jesus saying there?
Don't tell somebody to not do something that you're not willing to not do.
Okay.
Like, if it's something that you're calling somebody else out on, it should be something that you're doing that you're not doing as well. Like, does that make sense? Did I say that right?
Sure.
So we're not supposed to be condemning.
We're not supposed to be condemning. Okay.
That's not our job.
And there is a difference between judging and condemning.
Because there's a type of judging that we do, and we're told to do in the Bible, but there's other types, obviously, that we're told not to do.
We're supposed to judge.
I think when we first meet somebody, we right away we judge them before they speak,
Sure.
and I think what this is saying, hold off. Don't judge, understand who the person is before you judge them.
Okay. Sure.
And how you go about judging someone, they're going to come back and judge you in the same way.
Absolutely. Now, again, we always have to look at the Bible in the context that it was written in. And so in the context in which it was written, what we're looking at here is, who is Jesus specifically talking to? Now, this is the Sermon on the Mount, right? This is, Jesus is in the middle of a long sermon. But who is he specifically referencing? Well, he's specifically referencing the Pharisees here. He's specifically referencing the people who are in power of this day, who are the religious elites, as well as basically your pastor and politician wrapped into one. Praise God, that's not the case in well, I was going to say Massachusetts, but we're not in Massachusetts, Texas, and everywhere, really. Because you have this thing where basically they're saying, hey, look, like the Pharisees are the ones who are writing all these laws and writing all these rules and writing all these things, and Jesus is like, no, like you have completely missed it. And so that's what the Sermon on the Mount is basically saying, like, this is the law, but let me help you understand the law, because what the Pharisees have built off this is completely false.
But who he's speaking to is the people.
Well, he's speaking to all the people, absolutely, but what the people who he's specifically referencing in this point is people who have built on and added to the law. And so that would be the Pharisees, right? Now, he's not directly speaking to them, but what he's talking about is people who would do these things in the middle of the sermon. So, and you see the context of this before in chapter 6, where you see this come out, where Jesus is kind of explaining, like, you've heard it said, like, do not lust, but if, or do not commit adultery. But if I tell, and so that they would go around saying, okay, like, I didn't commit adultery, But then it's like, whoa, but basically your eyes have, in your eyes and in your mind, you've lusted after every woman here. You're not much different than the person who has committed adultery. It's like he says, you shall not murder. And everybody walks around like, I'm not a murderer, right? But your hate is built up in your heart. And so they had all these laws and worked around to kind of do this. And this is what Jesus is specifically addressing in the cultural context of the day. So, with that said, you see this, right? So what he's talking about, he's just specifically addressing the Pharisees, or those who would be in a position to pronounce judgment from a legal standpoint. So some of this is wrapped up in this. Would someone read verses 3 through 5 for me there?
I can.
Okay, thank you.
Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but you do not notice the log that is in your eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is the log in your own eye? You hypocrites, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye.
So, again, it goes back to this whole idea of judging others, right? And do you have the ability to lay judgment on another person? Jesus is like, you're a hypocrite, right? Like, everybody, you're so concerned about what's in your brother's eye, why don't you get concerned about the speck that's in your own eye? Or the log, I'm sorry. Thank you. So does Jesus say to ignore the speck in your brother's eye and deal with your log? So what does he say there?
Deal with your log, and then you can help the guy with the speck.
And I think that, and so again, there's other verses that will go into this. But what we are called to do as Christians, we are called to gently admonish one another. We are called to approach each other and correct in love. Not with like, oh my goodness, did you see what so-and-so wore to church today? Or, oh man, you won't believe what so-and-so did. We get so consumed with it. And that's the way we talk, right? I mean, it's the way we kind of interact with one another. So frequently, right? It's because of the news of the day, and it lends itself very easy to cast judgment. Now, what the Bible says here, specifically Jesus is saying, he says, look, like, you can deal and help someone through the difficulty in their life, but you need to make sure you are in a place spiritually where you can deal with it. Because if you have a log sticking out of your own eye, if you're trying to get something small out of someone's eye, and you're going to look in with a log sticking out of yours, you're probably going to put out their eye, right? I mean, you're going to do a lot of harm to someone else. It's a physicality thing. It's just you physically, not only can you not do it, but you're also going to cause more harm than good. But if you can figure out how to remove your log, if you can figure out how to deal with the situations in your life, work things out with God, then you have the ability, with that log being removed, to be able to help someone through their difficult time. But again, this doesn't always work well for us. When was the last time that you kind of prayed through something and went to help someone through something, and how did they respond? You don't know?
I said not well.
No, not well. Sometimes.
Oftentimes not well, normally not well, I guess, really.
And why do you think it doesn't go well?
Because nobody wants to be told they're wrong.
No, absolutely, right? But why can't they handle being wrong?
Because they have to deal with their sin.
They have to deal with their sin. They have to deal with an objective truth, something that's outside of themselves and how it makes them feel. And so often we want to just come back to how I feel, and I want to feel good. And so if I want to feel good, I'm just going to do the things that I'm going to feel good with. And so here, it's something where we can see that we are allowed to judge other people. We are allowed to kind of slowly but say, hey, this is the case. And this goes against so much of maybe what you've been taught or what you've heard throughout every Sunday school class or every Bible study that you've ever been to. You know what's really interesting right now? the #1 religious podcast right now is a fascinating listen. And I'm still not sure, I haven't finished it yet, so I'm still not sure how I feel about it, right? It's called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. If you're not familiar with it, basically there was a mega church in the late 2000s out in Seattle. It was run by a pastor by the name of Mark Driscoll. And you can see how does a church go from running 12 to 15,000 to then all of a sudden disbanding into nothing. Like, there's some issues with this and everything. And what I say is that what you have reporters for Christianity Today who is investigating and looking at it. But as you listen to more and more episodes, you can clearly tell that there is a bias on the reporter's point. There's something that they feel. It's something that they feel, and as a result, because they feel this way, the language and the words and the way they clip sermons and everything really come out to their feelings towards the situation and who they feel is at fault and everything. Now, I will say this. I'm not that super familiar with it other than what I've listened to. I've just been able to hear the bias in it. And you can tell because there's something that they feel and it's being pushed on us. And that happens so frequently, right?
Well, the news does it quite frequently. And I'll go back many years when they tried to prove that Chevy trucks explode on impact. It was not true, but the way the news set it up, they made it look like Chevy trucks explode on impact.
So let me ask you this. So say you run into a person in the wild, right? Someone outside the walls of this church, and there's someone who says, well, you can't judge me.
In the wild.
Or no one can judge me, right? Hey, have you been outside? It's pretty wild out there, right? So how do you kind of respond to someone to get them to kind of recognize that maybe judgment is okay? In fact, there's a need for judgment. How would you kind of present information to kind of to register with people as you try to deal with them, right? Because the goal is this, right? The goal is to go out there and defend our faith, right? And so if we're trying to dismiss this, well, a good God wouldn't judge. And this whole idea of, well, is this person okay with people judging people? And so how would you relate to them to kind of say, hey, you know what, maybe judgment is a good thing?
Kind of depends on what you're talking about. Because,
Okay.
I mean, if we're not, they're right, and then it's not my job to be their judge for a lot of things.
Absolutely.
I'm in no position to do that. There are people that God calls us, to be. Maybe it's our family. We have to, if you got kids, you've got to be their judge on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
That way, you're under your care. Well, these people are not. Is there someone, maybe God's in a position where he's above all of us, and he's in that position that we're not in?
Sure. What would a world without judgment, what would that look like?
Chaos.
What?
I said Seattle.
Seattle. Chaos.
Oh.
Apparently y'all are saying the same thing.
We're about to lose YouTube now.
Sure.
You're not wrong.
Hey, I
Until he
mean,
goes, wait, bring in the
was
state
it
police.
Chop then Chaz, right? I mean, that was kind of an experiment of what that would
The
look like.
summer of love.
Yeah, well, anyway, I don't want to get political. That's my own fault.
I think an example of with judging and not judging and finding the ways to gently correct is one where, like, usually you're establishing a relationship with a person before you're just
Sure.
correcting them. It's not one where you're just cornering them on the street and going, you gotta change. I dealt with my log, let's get with your spec. Like, you're not just isolating somebody you've never met and trying to deal with something in their life that they haven't talked to you about or that you you're guessing they have, you know.
Really?
Yeah, really.
No, that's a bad idea.
But there are times when the relationship comes to you, like, you know, forever ago there was a young mom that was brought through our church, that there were several different people who worked at speaking some truth into her life, and where things may not have turned well in corrections, over time she seems to have gotten some handle of stuff, even though she's not here. Like I've seen some growth on where there's been some correction on her behaviors from what people have worked on gently correcting when they were in her life. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Well, and what I was trying to go at is, like, again, like trying to give you some things that you can put in a toolbox. So when you run into someone in the wild who basically is like, well, you can't judge me. Like, well, this is how I feel, and you can't judge my feelings. And this is where you go, okay, well, let's talk about something outside you, right? So say, for instance, you know, your family member was murdered. If there's no judgment, that means that this person could just kill your family member and just walk away with it. Right? That someone could come into physical evil to you or someone you love and someone you care about, and that would have no effect on the outcome of life, right? I mean, in some cases, actually in all cases, I mean, I can't think of a murder case where it wouldn't be that you'd be thankful that you had a judge, not only that, but a just and righteous judge to be able to say, hey, y'all did something wrong, and there's punishment that you need to have as a result of this. How about sports, right? I mean, we saw the Astros, unfortunately, go by the wayside. But can you imagine if, like, Alex Bregman hit a foul ball and he just ran around the bases and said, I scored a run, and the umpire was like, sure, that sounds like a great thing. I mean, it would be kind of nice because, you know, we'd actually score a run that way, but that's another story. But I'm just saying, though, right, like, there would be no justice. There would be this feeling of a cry out against an unfair judge and an umpire who would just allow things to happen. You know, like, I mean, how many times have we seen throughout the World Series someone arguing over balls and strikes, right? That they're like, well, this is not, I disbelieve what you're saying. But what I saw was some really good umpiring, actually, for the most part, throughout the whole series. So,
But it, you know, throughout the Bible, or throughout the New Testament, Jesus is always pointing out, judging.
mm-hmm.
The woman that put the 2 mites in the basket, there was always somebody that criticized, and Jesus said, oh, really? Or when Jesus was dining with the tax collectors, and the Pharisees started complaining, you're among sinners. It always seems that he had a number of different instances in the New Testament about judging.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, just think about it in a very, if you're having a conversation with someone, right, and you're trying to be like, well, you can't judge me, or what makes you a valid judge of me, or something like that. And those are 2 very different questions. But again, it's like, if we're playing a board game together, right, if we're playing Monopoly, and I roll an 8 and I decide, you know what, I want that to be a 9, or I can just take as many spaces as I want, or I can just buy whatever property, or I can just take property and not pay money for it, right? You would be outraged. There needs to be a common set of rules that are established. And in general, though, we all have these feelings of outrage and injustice. So then it goes to the question of, where does this judgment come from? Because is it go by what I feel in the moment, or is it something that comes from outside me? And so this is something that apologists always talk about, right? Is that when people are kind of arguing, they say, well, you know, there is no such thing as God, and they ask all these morality questions. And so often a Christian apologist will basically say, well, if it's, you know, you're talking about a God, but you want a God that doesn't exist, right? A God who would basically be able to come down and stop all evil from happening whenever he felt like it. A God who would be able to do this and all these things, the whims, or if you just wanted like $1 million, you could just get $1 million. Like, that's not who a God is, because there would be no sense of justice in the world. There would be no sense of of any rules or reason, it would just still be absolute chaos. Now, I did a poor job explaining that. I hope you're still with me. Does that make sense at all? That there has to be, where does morality come from? Everyone in this world agrees on morality, right? I mean, for the most part, people are going to get together and just be like, you know what? Like, there was a video this week of a guy slapping a woman on a subway, right? I'm pretty sure that everybody is going to be upset about what the guy did to this woman. Now, I could be wrong. There could be other people, but there's some sort of sense of this, whatever this interaction is, whoever is wrong and whoever is right in the situation, we don't have all the information, but this interaction happened and no one feels good about what happened. Well, why? Because there's some sort of sense of morality. We all are kind of programmed with this whole idea. And really where that comes from, it comes from this identity of being created in the image of God, and that there is some sort of sense of righteousness, and that there is a God who is a righteous judge. Everybody following me here? All right. Let me go here. So I'm on number 6 here. So it says, would a good God judge? So this comes from, I forgot to put the reference in here. It's 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 through 7 here. It says, above all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing, following their own evil desires. And they will say, where is the coming he promised? Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on, and it has been from the beginning of creation. But they deliberately forgot that long ago God's word in the heavens came into being, and the earth was formed out of the water and by the water. And these waters also in the world were deluged and destroyed, and by the same word of the present heavens and earth were reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. That we have a promise that the day of the Lord is going to come. And there is a day where God is going to come in and he's going to just clean up, right? You know, back during the pandemic, we have a playroom in our house. And that playroom, our kids had just made a mess out of. And we were just recognizing there were broken toys in there or something like that. And so we kept warning our kids to clean up and put stuff away, and they didn't. So there was a final reckoning that happened, where my wife and I didn't let anyone come into the playroom, and we cleaned up how we saw fit. And there were kids who were upset because I'm like, where did that toy go?
You have a new wailing wall in your house.
It was, I'm like, I'm sorry, it was broken because you did not take care of it, and so I threw it out, right? And I'm like, it didn't feel necessarily a good thing, but I mean, there had to be a point to say, if we're going to restore order and function to our playroom, then we needed to come in and kind of clean house. Yes?
2 Peter 3, 3 through 7? Is
Yes.
Okay, I'm posting it in the comments.
Yes, the 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 through 7. But I mean, that whole chapter, I was trying to figure out how to take a snippet that would kind of encapsulate the whole feel of that chapter. It really doesn't do it justice, right? But this whole idea is that the Lord is coming back, that the Lord is this righteous judge, that the Lord basically says, I have set aside, these are my standards, and I'm going to clean house at some point in time. And the question would become, why would a good God do that?
My skeptic friend's going to say, but you told me God's a God of love and stuff. What is this? That's not a God of love.
But as parents, we have to do things for our children that we don't like to do, or that they don't like, but we're doing it out of love for them because we want what's good for them. I think in the same respect, that's where God.
But we don't send them to hell.
Well, but here's the other thing too. There are subjective claims versus objective reality, or I'm sorry, versus objective truths, right? This whole idea that your skeptic friend would say, well, I thought your God is a loving God. Well, the answer is yes. Yes, he is. Because Romans 3:10 says, No one is righteous, not even one. Everyone his soul is sick, is desperately wicked. Who can know it? All is leading astray. That you're no better than me, I'm no better than you. Everybody is broken. And so instead of God just destroying entire humanity, he gave us an opportunity to find redemption and love. Now, I don't know if that would appease your skeptic friend or not, but the point being is that the objective truth here is that God loves us so much that he's willing to go to the lengths. He's waiting to be patient and wait to see if we can figure it out, instead of just destroying us in that very instant and very moment.
Yeah, I make the argument that he is still being a God of love to the ones that he's judging,
Mm-hmm.
but to allow them to live for eternally, getting worse and worse and stuff out that way would not be love. It would not have been a loving thing to do either.
Well, when you think about it from this standpoint, right? A loving God gave us free will to make choices. And we can choose to worship him, or we can choose to reject him. If you want a God who's going to come down and interfere with someone's free will, then that doesn't sound like a very loving God who's just coming down and basically taking over my body and forcing me to do something I don't want to do. Again, I don't know if that will convince your skeptic friend, but it's a food for thought, right? I mean, it goes from these subjective feelings. I feel like your God is a loving God, and therefore this should be happening. But if you understand how Christianity works, there is an objective truth, which is God is God, and God has standards. No person lives up to those standards, but the objective truth outside of that is that instead of God just automatically destroying us and wiping us out, he instead sent his son, an incarnate form of himself, to die on the cross for our sins, so that we might be able to restore that right relationship with him, and that we can experience godliness. And the other thing too is that, I've never known someone to really be happy and content in this world and in this life if they're living worldly things. What I mean by that is some of the most miserable and unhappy people are millionaires who live in LA and Hollywood right now. I mean, they're absolutely miserable people, and they just go from one place to another, from person to person, trying to find some sense of joy. And they basically say, hey, you keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm pretty sure Einstein said that's the definition of insanity. Why don't you try something different? Because what I've found in my own personal testimony is that if I, instead of stopped looking inward, I started looking outward to an objective truth, then I found that there is a God who created me and who loved me, and no matter what I'm going through, I can still find joy. What I'm trying to do is give you some tools here. Let me land the plane here. So the last thing I have is a good God. God is a good judge. So Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 4 says, he is the rock. His works are perfect. All his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong. And upright and just is he. That God himself is a just God. And again, God's desire in all this is not to condemn the world, but to redeem the world. That's John 3:17. We memorize John 3:16 so much, but we forget that probably one of the most powerful verses in all of Scripture follow the most popular verse here. And so let me read it to you. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Again, it's Jesus' purpose in this world is not to make people to feel bad about themselves. His goal is to redeem. The problem is Satan wants to continue to make us turn inward to our feelings. And so that's one of the reasons why the world and Jesus are always at odds with themselves, because excuse me, I feel like I want to sin, and I feel like I'm justified and okay in my sin. And Jesus says, no, your standard is going to lead to death, but I'm going to bring life if you follow me. So that's what I have for you. I hope you've enjoyed this study. If there are any thoughts, comments, questions, Concerns, rebuttals? Well, if there's nothing else, we're going to say goodbye to the online people and just give me a thumbs up when we're gone.
Waiting to see you wave the thing. Hold on. just a
All right. So I'm going to say this, but if you don't feel comfortable saying it on an online stream, I don't want to